Stories are like a well-constructed engine, made up of many fine-tuned moving parts that systematically work together to achieve the author's purpose. Setting, characters, and plot are like gears, and as they rotate, they move each other, thus creating an everlasting impact on each other. In order to best understand a story and analyze it, it is important to be able to comprehend and synthesize the plot. Now, imagine you were reading a story that kept you on the edge of your seat, and all of a sudden, halfway through, the pages turned completely white, utterly blank. Wouldn't you be disappointed that you didn't find out how the story ended? Wouldn't you be a little annoyed that the author left you hanging? Plot takes the reader through the journey of the story from beginning to end. Without one of its key elements, the reader is left hanging. It's what makes the book or story hard to put down or keeps you on the edge of the seat when someone's telling you a story. So let's look at a traditional plot diagram to get a better understanding of how plot works. Plot is made up of 5 essential parts: the exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and announcement or resolution. Each of these parts systematically work together to create the whole. Exposition is the introduction that provides all the necessary details to set up a story. This includes characters, setting, and any background information that the author thinks is necessary. This leads us into our rising action, the part of the story that develops the problem or conflict through a series of events that builds interest and/or suspense. Then we have our climax. This is the turning point of the story, when the problems or conflict have reached its peak and cannot become greater, and therefore must de-escalate. Which leads us into our falling action. This is the part of the story where the author begins to tie up loose ends. The events of the story have reached their climax, and therefore the author must piece back together the puzzle that is the story. I like to look at it as a present. This is the part where the author is wrapping up the present and taping the ends. But it's not quite complete yet, because the author must give us the resolution, or the announcement. This is the conclusion to the story that reveals the solution to the problem or conflict, such as a pretty bow put on the end of the story that wraps it up nicely for the readers to enjoy. Another way of looking at plot is through the somebody wanted but so then structure. This walks you through plot by analyzing its specific parts in a different way than the plot diagram. For example, you begin by looking at who is the main character of the story. This is the somebody that the author is telling us about. Then we look at what they wanted. What did the character want to do, achieve, or what was their goal? But then they probably run into a problem, so we have to figure that out. And then so what happens next? How does the character try to solve the problem? This is a big part that leads up to the then, which is the resolution of the story, which helps the author completely conclude the story and wrap it up, like I said, in a nice present for you. Now, it's important to be careful when analyzing plot because you want to make sure that you're analyzing plot, not story. So we're going to identify the differences between plot and story. Plot development is brief, specific, and tight, whereas story development is about creating details and embellishments to make the plot engaging. So, an interesting way to look at this is plot is like the body. It's necessary, but kind of bland unless you embellish it. So, each day, you put on some funky clothes and style your hair so that you look unique and different. So, story is the unique whole picture, whereas plot is the foundation. Simply put it, plot is a sequence of events that happen in a story, while the story is what the work is all about, the main idea, what the reader really should get out of it. Now, like I said, setting is one of the gears that moves plot forward. Plot is impacted by the different aspects of setting, such as place, time, and weather. First, let's look at place. Where a story occurs can have a great impact on how the plot plays out. For example, the state or the country can really impact a plot. If a story occurred in Texas, it could be drastically different than if the same story occurred in Africa. Now, this isn't just limited to states and countries. It can get even more specific. For example, the specific location can greatly impact what happens. You're probably not going to be doing the same things at home as you do at school. Just in a story, the characters are going to react different as if they were at school versus at home. Now, time also impacts story. Time, such as time of day, can alter a story's ending. For example, if someone woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning in the story, then a lot of events are going to follow throughout the day. But say they were lazy and they slept in till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there's not going to be as much progress in the story, and the sequence and plot might change up a little bit. Time of year can also have a great impact on the story. For example, if the story is taking place during the summertime, then the characters probably won't be at school, and if they are at school, it might be for interesting reasons such as summer school, or maybe they're up to no good. Now, the year that a story occurs also can impact. Imagine you're in school in the year 1775. You probably aren't in school during the whole day because you have to work on the land with your fellow family members. But today, school is completely different. You have computers and you get to work there all day, and your only job is learning. Now, weather can also have a great impact on the story. Imagine it's a dark and stormy night, and you're riding down an old backcountry road. You might end up having a wreck, or some spooky being might come out and get you. These are all things that probably wouldn't occur in the plot if the weather was bright, sunny, and beautiful. Characters are another important gear that move plot. Plot can be affected by characters' personalities. For instance, if a character is an introvert, they're going to act a lot different than if they were an extrovert, and the story is going to progress through a whole different lens. Same as if they were a leader or a follower. If you're following a story through the eyes of a leader, you're going to take a whole different lens than if it was a follower. Now, the gender of the characters also has a great impact, as we saw in our story, Girl Fighter Hero, as does age. If the character is old and frail, they're most likely not going to be taking part of the same events that a young, able-bodied person is able to. Characters are equipped with specific responses that an author strategically chooses. The actions and thoughts of a character can also perpetuate the plot. Miscellaneous information that also aids in our plot development are morals, religion, and beliefs and classes characters. This all can depict what ends up happening based on their decisions. Now let's look at a few scenarios. Imagine you're a 17-year-old and you get pulled over for speeding. Imagine if that happened in the United States versus Canada. Take a minute to pause the video and think about what would happen. In the United States, a 17-year-old has their driver's license, and so they might just get a warning or a simple speeding ticket. However, in Canada, children do not get their driver's license until they turn 18 years old. So, if they got pulled over at 17 years old, not only are they speeding, but they're also driving without a license. Therefore, the consequences will be much greater, affecting the whole outcome of the plot. Let's look at another scenario. A young lady is interested in dating a young man. The time period in which this story occurs can have great impact on what actually happens. If it's the 19th century, the young lady might not have a say in who she dates. She might be part of an arranged marriage, and therefore, she must respectfully date and marry the person that her family has picked out for her. Let's fast forward a few years into the 20th century. This same young lady could be interested in dating a young man of her choosing. However, the cards are in the man's hands, and he must decide whether or not he will pursue and court the lady. In the 20th century that we live in today, those dating rules of the past have been, therefore, you are more the author of your plot in that circumstance. Let's continue. Imagine a young boy falls into the lake while playing with his friends. Take a minute to think about if this happened in July versus December. What do you think might happen? In July, the boy would probably just swim out towards the shore and continue playing with his friends. However, in December, when the waters are chilly and icy, it might be a whole new story. His friends might run for help. Might they be too late to save him? It all determines what happens in the plot. Let's look at another example. You've planned a picnic with your friends. The day comes and you're so excited, but you see a dark storm cloud ahead. Will you make the best of the day? Or will you completely cancel your plans with your friends? None of this probably would have happened if it was a bright sunny day. This is a situation that depends on not only the setting, but also the character responses. Our final scenarios. The leader of an American army is looking to promote a soldier to general. When he surveys the different characters, what aspects do you think he will be looking for? Will how the characters respond to different circumstances determine who he picks as the leader? And will this also affect the plot? Take a moment to think about it. If the character was a follower or an introvert, they probably wouldn't be picked for the role, and therefore their story and the plot development of their lives might alter completely different than what would happen if an extrovert and a leader was picked for this position. Therefore, character greatly impacts this scenario. Now imagine a moral man cannot afford to feed his family. What does he do? Does he go and steal? Or does he find other means to save his family? The character's responses will greatly impact what happens in the plot and how the author takes this story. Now that you have a better understanding of plot, this will guide how you are able to analyze stories and even how you write your own stories. It is important to remember the basic steps of plot and the gears that help move it forward.